My family accused me of stealing our grandmother's $50,000 necklace to kick me from my sister's wedding. They threw my things out and changed the locks. They didn't know I had the one thing that could expose them all: Grandma's final, notarized letter. There's a silence that settles in a house where you are seen but not heard. It's not an absence of noise. On the contrary, our house was always filled with sound. My sister Chloe's laughter, my mother's chatter on the phone, the drone of the television my father watched. But my own contributions, my very presence, seemed to exist in a pocket of profound quiet. My name is Anna. I'm 38, and for most of my life, I was the invisible cornerstone of my family. I see it most clearly in the memory of 1,000 dinners. Take any Tuesday evening from the last 10 years. I'd be the one in the kitchen, navigating the dance between 3 different pots on the stove, trying to time my mother's salt-free fish with my father's overcooked vegetables and a separate, more flavorful dish for Chloe. The air would be thick with the scent of garlic and lemon, a smell of effort, and I would bring the plates to the dining table where the rest of them were already seated, their conversation flowing without a pause. My father wouldn't look up from his tablet. My mother would be mid-sentence, recounting some gossip from her bridge club. Chloe, my younger sister by 5 years, would be scrolling through her phone, a small, self-satisfied smile on her face. "Oh, Anna, you're here," my mother might say, a brief acknowledgement before turning back to her story. "No, thank you. No, this looks wonderful." Just an observation of my arrival, as if I were a piece of furniture that had just been moved into place. This past year, the sound in the house had reached a fever pitch, all of them revolving around Chloe. Chloe was getting married. Her fiancé, Richard, was a junior partner at a prestigious law firm, and his family, the Hamiltons, were members of the Oak Valley Country Club. To my parents, this wasn't just a marriage, it was a social coronation. Everything has to be perfect for this wedding. I once overheard my mother telling my father in a hushed, urgent whisper in the hallway, "The Hamiltons are not people you disappoint." So, my life became a series of errands for a wedding I felt increasingly detached from. Picking up swatches, tasting cakes, fielding calls from vendors. My sacrifices were simply expected. My time, my energy, my money, it was all just part of the family account to be drawn from as needed for the more important project, Chloe. I had a ritual. After a particularly draining day of wedding planning or a tense family dinner where my opinion was solicited and then promptly ignored, I would go out to my 10-year-old sedan parked in the driveway. I'd slip into the driver's seat, but I wouldn't turn the key. I'd just sit there in the dark, in the silence that was truly silent. I'd rest my forehead against the cool, smooth plastic of the steering wheel and just breathe. In, out. A 10-minute ceremony of reclaiming my own oxygen before I had to go back inside and surrender it again. It was the only space in the world that felt entirely mine. The object that would eventually detonate our fragile peace was resting in a velvet box in my closet. It was my grandmother's sapphire necklace. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a relic. My grandfather, a man I'd never met, had it made for her on their 25th anniversary. The center stone was a deep, velvety blue, the color of a twilight sky just before the stars appear. It was heavy in your palm, its platinum setting cool and substantial. It was a symbol of a love that was real, enduring, and quiet. Everything the love in our house was not. I remember the day she gave it to me. I was 16, all awkward limbs and teenage insecurity. She was frail, propped up on pillows in the big armchair that smelled of lavender and old books. The rest of the family was downstairs, the noise a distant rumble. She called me over, her hand trembling slightly as she pressed the box into mine. "This is for you, my steadfast girl," she'd whispered. Her eyes, though clouded with age, were sharp and clear. "Not for your wedding day or some special occasion. It's for you, because your heart is true, and I worry that in this house, a true heart is seen as a weakness. Let this remind you of your strength." We never spoke of it again. It was a secret, a sacred pact between us. For 22 years, I had kept it safe. It was my most cherished possession, a tangible link to the one person who had ever truly seen me. The first crack in our family's carefully constructed facade appeared on a Saturday afternoon, surrounded by mountains of tulle and lace at a bridal boutique. Chloe, admiring her reflection in a ridiculously expensive gown, turned to me. "Anna," she said, her voice light and casual. "I've been thinking, you should let me wear Grandma's necklace for the wedding. It would be my something borrowed and something blue. It would mean so much." I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. "Oh, Chloe, I don't think so. It's really personal to me." Her face fell, the bridal radiance replaced by a familiar pout. My mother, ever Chloe's defender, swooped in. "Don't be difficult, Anna. It's a family piece. Think of how beautiful it would look. It's the least you can do to support your sister." I tried to explain. "Grandma gave it to me. For me. It wasn't meant for." Chloe cut me off, and her next words, though quiet, were laced with a bitterness that startled me. "Grandma always loved you more," she murmured, looking at my reflection instead of my face in a mirror. "For one day, I just want to feel like the favorite. Is that too much to ask?" And there it was. It wasn't about the necklace. It was about stealing the validation that came with it. It was about wearing my grandmother's love around her neck because she was insecure she'd never truly had it. My mother put a comforting arm around Chloe's shoulders, shooting me a look that was a clear command. "Fix this. Give her what she wants." I didn't answer. I just stood there, the silence in my own head suddenly roaring, and I felt the first tremor of the earthquake that was to come. The days that followed were a masterclass in psychological warfare. It was a siege, and I was a fortress of one. Chloe's casual request morphed into the central crisis of the wedding preparations. Every conversation, every interaction was a new tactic to wear me down. It started with my mother's gentle guilt trips. "Anna, honey, your sister is under so much stress," she'd say, stirring her tea, her eyes full of performative concern. "She's barely sleeping. This thing with the necklace is really upsetting her. We're your parents. You owe us this peace of mind." Then came my father's brand of dismissive logic. "It's an object, Anna," he said one evening, not looking up from his newspaper. "Family is more important than objects. You're being overly emotional." Chloe, for her part, played the wounded victim. She would sigh dramatically whenever I entered a room. She'd speak to me in a pained, whispery voice, as if my very presence caused her physical discomfort. She'd leave wedding magazines open on the coffee table, all turned to pages showcasing brides adorned with statement necklaces, a series of passive-aggressive paper cuts. The gaslighting was the worst part. "You're remembering it wrong, dear," my mother insisted, her voice syrupy sweet. "Grandma loved you both equally. She was an old woman. She was probably confused when she gave it to you. In her heart, she would have wanted Chloe, the bride, to have it." They would try to rewrite my most precious memory, to strip it of its meaning and power. Each comment was a small chip of my foundation, and I could feel myself starting to crumble. I began to doubt myself. Was I being selfish? Was I ruining my sister's happiness over a piece of jewelry? I spent my 10 minutes of silence in the car each night, not finding peace, but fighting a rising tide of confusion and hurt. The final assault came a week before the wedding. I was summoned to the living room for what my mother called a family meeting. The air was thick with the grim finality of a courtroom. My father sat in his recliner, his face set like stone. My mother was on the sofa, clutching a throw pillow to her chest. Chloe sat beside her, her eyes red-rimmed, the very picture of a wronged maiden. It was an ambush. "This has gone on long enough," my father began, his voice leaving no room for discussion. "The wedding is in 7 days. You will go upstairs, get the necklace, and give it to your sister." I looked from his stern face to my mother's anxious one, to Chloe's triumphant sorrow. And in that moment, something inside me, something that had been bending for 38 years, finally snapped. It wasn't a loud crack, but a quiet, decisive break. "No," I said. My voice was steady, almost unnervingly calm. It felt like it belonged to someone else. My father's jaw tightened. "What did you say?" I said no. I repeated, looking directly at him. "Grandma gave it to me. It's mine." Chloe burst into theatrical sobs. I can't believe you're doing this to me. To us. She turned to our parents, her voice rising. I knew it. She was always jealous. You know what? I bet she stole it from Grandma. She probably took advantage of her when she was old and sick. I stared at her, my blood running cold. The accusation, so vile and baseless, hung in the air. I waited for my parents to defend me, to express shock, to tell Chloe she had gone too far. They did not. My mother just pulled Chloe closer, stroking her hair. My father's eyes narrowed at me, not with disbelief at Chloe's words, but with cold fury at my defiance. And I understood. They weren't going to defend me because, on some level, they accepted the accusation. It fit their narrative. I was the difficult, selfish one, and Chloe was the victim. The moment stretched into a terrible silence. The silence of my entire life, of every thankless dinner, of every ignored opinion, of every minute spent in service to them, all coalesced into this one unbearable moment. It was the silence of realizing you are utterly, completely alone in a room full of your own family. My father stood up. If that's your choice, then you've made it, he said, his voice flat and empty of all emotion. We cannot have this toxicity in our house during what should be a happy time. We need this to be a place of celebration for Chloe. He paused, delivering the final blow. It's time you found your own place. The next day, I went to work in a daze. I moved through my tasks like an automaton, the conversation from a night before playing on a loop in my head. I felt hollowed out, a walking shell. When I drove home that evening, a deep sense of dread settled in my stomach. As I turned onto our street, I saw them. On the lawn, next to the perfectly manicured rose bushes my mother was so proud of, were 3 cheap cardboard boxes. My books, my clothes, my few personal treasures, all packed away and discarded like trash. My heart stopped. I parked the car and walked toward the front door as if in a dream. I put my key in the lock. It wouldn't turn. I tried again. Nothing. They had changed the locks. I stood there on the porch of the house I grew up in, the house I had cared for, my key useless in my hand. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my father. It read, "Your personal items are on the porch for collection. Future correspondence should be directed through Chloe's wedding planner. You're no longer welcome at the wedding or in this house. Not as a father to a daughter, but as a landlord evicting a tenant." The clinical cruelty of it was more shocking than any shouting match could have been. I sank down onto the top step, the rough concrete cold through my pants, and stared at the boxes that held the remnants of my life. The shattering was complete. The drive to my friend Sarah's house was a blur. I remember her opening the door, taking one look at my face, and wordlessly pulling me into an embrace that felt like the only solid thing in the universe. I don't think I spoke for the first 24 hours. I just sat on her sofa, wrapped in a blanket, staring at a wall. I was a ghost haunting my own life, numb to the point of non-existence. Sarah, my validator, my rock, didn't push. She just brought me tea I didn't drink and soup I didn't eat. She simply sat with me, her quiet, unwavering presence a shield against the echoing silence in my head. The family had already begun their campaign. A text from a confused aunt asked if I was feeling okay. A voicemail from my cousin offered condolences for my sudden breakdown. They were painting me as unstable, a jealous sister who had snapped under the pressure of the wedding. It was a neat, tidy story that absolved them of all guilt. I was not just exiled. I was being erased, my character assassinated by the people who were supposed to protect it. On the 3rd day, the numbness began to recede, replaced by waves of crushing grief. The weight of every injustice, every sacrifice I'd ever made for them, came crashing down on me. I felt a desperate, primal need for comfort, for connection to the one person who had ever made me feel truly seen. My grandmother. My boxes were stacked in Sarah's spare room. Among them was a worn, cedar memory box, the one my grandmother had kept her most precious keepsakes in. After she died, I couldn't bring myself to open it. The grief was too raw. Looking at her things felt like admitting she was truly gone. But now, in the depths of my despair, it was the only place I could think to turn. Maybe what you need right now isn't to look forward, but to look back, Sarah said gently, as if reading my mind. To remember you were loved, truly loved. With trembling hands, I lifted the lid. The scent of lavender and old paper, her scent, filled the air, and a sob caught in my throat. Inside were the familiar treasures, a pair of her reading glasses, a bundle of letters from my grandfather tied with a faded ribbon, a pressed gardenia from her wedding bouquet. I ran my fingers over them, weeping for the love I had lost and the love I had been denied. My fingers brushed against something in the lining, a slight bulge, a false bottom. My heart stuttered. I pried at the edge with my fingernail, and a thin piece of wood lifted away. Beneath it lay a thick, sealed manila envelope. My name, Anna, was written across the front in my grandmother's elegant, familiar script. My breath hitched. I tore it open. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a letter, several pages long, handwritten. My dearest Anna, it began. If you are reading this, it means the day I feared has come to pass. I am so sorry, my steadfast girl, that I am not there to protect you from the storms within our own family. I read on, my vision blurring with tears. She wrote of her love for me, of the strength she saw in my quiet heart. And then came the part that made the air leave my lungs. I am giving you the sapphire necklace with a clear and legal mind. I am doing this because I see the transactional nature of your parents' love and your sister's envy. I fear one day they will try to take from you what is rightfully yours, or worse, convince you that you are not worthy of it. Let this letter be your shield. You are worthy, Anna. Never let them make you doubt it. The second document was a legally certified copy of a specific clause from her last will and testament. It was dated, signed by her, and witnessed by 2 people at her lawyer's office, explicitly bequeathing the sapphire necklace and its entire appraised value to me, Anna Catherine Miller, as an unconditional gift. It was notarized. It was irrefutable. I spent that night on Sarah's couch, the documents spread on the coffee table like a battle plan. A war was raging inside me. One part of me, the part that had been conditioned for a lifetime to keep the peace, wanted to burn the letter, to disappear, to let them have their victory if it meant an end to the pain. Is justice worth this? I asked myself, the words a silent scream in my mind. Is it worth becoming the reason my family is torn apart forever? Sarah found me there at dawn, staring at the papers. She put a mug of hot coffee in my hands. What are you thinking? She asked softly. I don't know if I can do it, I whispered. She looked at me, her gaze steady and fierce. They already tore it apart, Anna, she said, her voice firm. They handed you the matches and the gasoline. You're just deciding whether to light it to see your way out or to let them burn you with it. Her words cut through my fear. She was right. They had already declared war. I was just deciding whether to surrender or to fight back with the truth. My grandmother had given me a shield. It was time to use it. The next morning, I called a lawyer Sarah recommended. I explained the situation, my voice gaining strength as I spoke. He was professional, empathetic, and when I told him about the notarized letter, there was a pause on the line. Your grandmother was a very smart woman, he said. He suggested we contact the will's executor for the original documents as further leverage. The executor was my uncle, Ben, my father's younger brother, a quiet man who had always kept his distance from our family's drama. I dialed his number with trepidation. He picked up on the second ring. Uncle Ben, I began, it's Anna. He sighed a long, weary sound. Anna, I was wondering when they would finally push you too far, he said, and I was so shocked I couldn't speak. Your grandmother was a wise woman. She called this the contingency plan. She made me promise not to interfere unless you asked. She said you had to be the one to find your own voice. He paused. It sounds like you found it. I have the original will and my own sworn testimony ready. We had a plan. My lawyer drafted a cease and desist letter. It was a masterpiece of cold, legal precision. It detailed the irrefutable proof of my ownership of the necklace, demanded the immediate cessation of all defamatory statements about my character and mental state, and required a formal, written apology to be distributed to every family member they had lied to. We timed it perfectly. On Saturday afternoon, Chloe's lavish bridal shower was in full swing at my parents' house. It was their moment of peak social performance. At exactly 3 p.m., a professional legal courier, dressed in a sharp suit, walked up the driveway and rang the bell. He handed a crisp, heavy, intimidating legal envelope directly to my father. I wasn't there, of course, but my cousin Jessica, who had always had a soft spot for me, was. Her text came in a frantic stream. 3:05 p.m. OMG, a courier just delivered something to Uncle Michael. He looked serious. 3:10 p.m. He took it into the study. Your mom followed him. What's going on? 3:20 p.m. Your mom just came out and whispered something to Richard's mom. The Hamiltons are leaving. They look upset. 3:30 p.m. It's so weird here. The music is off. People are whispering. Your dad looks like he saw a ghost. Everyone is leaving. The party is over. I sat in Sarah's quiet living room, reading the texts, the shield my grandmother had given me held firmly in my hands. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation, just the quiet, devastating implosion of a world built on lies. The fallout was not a storm, but a series of panicked, undignified tremors. The first call came from my mother that evening. Her voice, usually so controlled, was shrill. Anna, what have you done? How could you do this to us? You've humiliated us in front of the Hamiltons. Chloe is inconsolable. I waited for her to finish. When she finally paused to take a breath, I spoke, my voice calmer than I had ever felt. What I did, I said, was defend myself with the truth. You might want to ask your lawyer about the difference between humiliation and defamation. There was a choked sound on the other end. The call ended. Next was my father. He tried a different tactic, blustering rage. You've made a huge mistake, young lady. We will sue you for the emotional distress you've caused this family. You are welcome to try, I replied, my lawyer's words fresh in my mind. My attorney is looking forward to the discovery process. I imagine depositions about what exactly Grandma's state of mind would be very enlightening for a judge. Silence. He hung up. The final call, days later, was from Chloe. It was the most pathetic of all. She was sobbing. Anna, please. You've made your point. Everyone is miserable. Just tell everyone it was a big misunderstanding. Tell them you'll come back to the wedding. We can fix this. This was their version of an apology, an offer to allow me to participate in my own erasure. There's nothing to fix, Chloe, I said softly. There is only the truth. My only terms are a public, written apology to the same family members you lied to, acknowledging your accusation was false and your actions were malicious, and a second apology to me. I paused, letting the weight of my demand settle. The choice is yours. Of course, they could never do it. Admitting fault was not in their vocabulary. Their pride was more valuable to them than their daughter, their sister. And in their refusal, they gave me my final, true release. I didn't go to the wedding. I heard through Jessica that it was a tense, subdued affair. The Hamiltons were polite but distant. The joy had been surgically removed from the event, leaving only the expensive, hollow shell. The cloud of the scandal, the whispers of the imploded bridal shower, hung over everything. My family got their perfect pictures, but their social victory was a resounding defeat. I took the money I'd saved for years, money that was no longer being siphoned off for household repairs and my parents' expenses, and I made a down payment on a small condo in a different part of the city, a place with big windows and quiet walls. The day I signed the papers, I wore the necklace. It wasn't a display of wealth or victory. It was a private, symbolic act, a cool weight against my skin that felt like my grandmother's hand on my shoulder. It was my armor. My new life began to take shape. I started a new tradition, a weekly found family dinner with Sarah and with Uncle Ben and his wife, who had welcomed me with an unassuming warmth that felt more genuine than anything I had known at home. We'd cook together, drink cheap wine, and laugh. We were building a new family, one based not on obligation, but on mutual respect and affection. About 6 months after the wedding, I ran into my mother at the grocery store. I was in the produce aisle, deciding between kale and spinach, when I saw her at the other end. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. I saw a flicker of something in her face. Anger, shame, I couldn't be sure. She immediately grabbed her cart, spun it around with a clatter, and disappeared down the aisle of canned goods. There was no confrontation, no tearful reconciliation, just the quiet, pathetic retreat of a woman who could not face what she had done. And in that moment, I felt not anger, but a profound pity. Her punishment was not anything I had done to her. It was the person she had chosen to be. She was trapped in the prison of her own pride, and I was free. Tonight, I'm sitting in my own living room, the city lights twinkling outside my window. The sapphire necklace rests in its velvet box on my dresser. I don't wear it often, but I like knowing it's there. It's a reminder. They didn't just take a home from me. They gave me a reason to build my own. They tried to steal a symbol of my grandmother's love, but in the end, they only proved what she knew all along. That true worth isn't something you wear around your neck. It's something you build inside yourself. Lawsuit by painful lawsuit, boundary by blessed boundary. I paid a high price for my freedom, a tax on my liberation written in heartache and betrayal. But the peace I found on the other side, that kind of peace is priceless.